Evo, ja sam sad stavila, mislim da se snima, jesam? Ok. Snimam sad i mi smo na stranici 412 i u biti sad je pitanje, mi smo jedan dio u biti to već čitali, znači pitanje je izbor, možemo s 413 zapravo početi. Pitanje je izbor vladara. Znači, kako ćemo ih izabrati i malo smo razgovarali kako se osloboditi od krivih uvjerenja. To je kao uvod u onaj dio države koji se bavi sa takozvanim noble lie, genaion soidos. To je kao dobro, u biti visoko rođeno laž, visoko rođena laž. Znači, ali i malo se stidi Sokrata, o tome razgovara, ali interesantna je priča, zato bi počela tu. Znači, tu smo čitali prošli put, mislim, do možda kraj 413, jer smo toliko čitali. Kristina, mislim da si ti čitala.
Ja mislim da zadnji put ja nisam bila.
A možda nisi bila, a onda više ne znam ko je čitao prošli put. Možda je, čekaj, jesi ti bila, više se ne sjećam. Zapravo sam su nas...
Ja sam tu na mobitelu pa mi je teško se snalaziti.
Nema problema.
Mislim da sam ja čitala, to je bilo pred 2 tjedna. Jer ja nisam od prošlog tjedna dobila, kasnila mi je vaša poruka. Pa nisam tek sam to ne znam, subotu, nedjelju kad čitala.
Prošli tjedan sam otkazala. Ovako, ja ću čitati malo da dođemo do mjesta, čitat ću malo naglasa. Znači, mi smo, u biti ovo što je prethodilo je bilo odgoj gimnastikom i glazbom i kako previše glazba u biti omekšava dušu previše, a malo glazbe omekšava u dobrom smislu onaj dio duše koji treba biti hrabar, a previše omekšava. Znači da negdje sredina, sretnu sredinu moramo naći, a sad dolazi ono pitanje, evo ja ću čitati jedan dio, onda ću ja vama dati čitati. Znači, mi smo na stranici 412b. Mislim da smo ovo prošli put čitali, ali malo ću ponoviti tako da ulazimo malo lakše u tematiku, malo brže. Such would be the outlines of their education and breeding. Smo svi zajedno na istoj stranici.
Da.
412b. Znači, radi se o odgoju i obrazovanju čuvara. Such would be the outlines of their education and breeding. For why should one recite the list of the dances of such citizens, their hunts and chases with hounds, their athletic contests and races? It is pretty plain that they must conform to these principles, and there is no longer any difficulty in discovering them. There is, it may be, no difficulty, he said. Very well, said I. What then have we next to determine? Is it not which ones among them shall be the rulers and the ruled? Certainly. That the rulers must be the elder and the ruled the younger is obvious. It is. And that the rulers must be their best. This too. And do not the best of the farmers prove to be the best farmers? Yes. And in this case, since we want them to be the best of the guardians, must they not be the best guardians, the most regardful of the state? Ovo je sad ona centralna točka, znači trebamo izabrati među čuvarima one koji su najbolji i oni će biti najbolji koji će najviše imati obzir na državu, na polis. Yes, they must then to begin with be intelligent in such matters and capable, and furthermore careful of the interests of the state. I ovo je točno, baš važna točka, znači radi se o interesima. Znači, čuvar mora imati na srcu interese polisa, interese države. That is so, but one would most likely to be careful of that which he loved, necessarily. And again, one would be most likely to love that whose interests he supposed to coincide with his own, and thought that when it prospered, he too would prosper, and if not, the contrary. Ova rečenica bi samo htjela preporučiti nekoliko puta čitati. Znači, ona je najbolje čuvar. Would be most likely to be careful of that which he loved. And he would be most likely to love that whose interests he supposed to coincide with his own interests. And if he thought that when it prospered, the polis, when it prospered, he would also prosper. And if not, the contrary. Znači, to je sad taj odnos između javnoga i privatnoga interesa. Evo, tu ćemo nastaviti. Ok, ja bih sad zamolila neko drugo da čita odavdje. To je sad tema za naš razgovor danas i možemo nastaviti ovako do kraja ove knjige i onda možda još jedna stranica iduće. Evo, ko bi htio danas čitati? Kristina, bi htjela sad ti uskočiti?
Može.
Evo tu, so it is, he said.
Okay. So it is, he said. Then we must pick out from the other guardians such men as to our observation appear most inclined through the entire course of their lives to be zealous, to do what they think for the interest of the state, and who would be least likely to consent to do the opposite. That would be a suitable choice, he said. I think, then, we shall have to observe them at every period of life to see if they are conservators and guardians of this conviction in their minds, and never by sorcery nor by force can be brought to expel from their souls unawares this conviction that they must do what is best for the state. What do you mean by the expelling? He said. I will tell you, said I. It seems to me that the exit of a belief from the mind is either voluntary or involuntary. Voluntary is the departure of the false belief from one who learns better. Involuntary, that of every true belief. The voluntary, he said, I understand, but I need instruction about the involuntary. How now, said I, don't you agree with me in thinking that men are unwillingly deprived of good things, but willingly of evil? Or is it not an evil to be deceived in respect of the truth, and a good to possess truth? And don't you think that to opine the things that are is to possess the truth? Why, yes, said he, you are right, and I agree that men are unwillingly deprived of true opinions. And doesn't this happen to them by theft, by the spells of sorcery, or by force? I don't understand now either, he said. I must be talking in high tragic style, I said. By those who have their opinions stolen from them, I mean those who are over-persuaded and those who forget, because in the one case time, in the other argument, strips them unawares of their beliefs. Now I presume you understand, do you not? Yes. Well then, by those who are constrained or forced, I mean those whom some pain or suffering compels to change their minds. That too I understand, and you are right. And the victims of sorcery? I am sure you too would say, are they who alter their opinions under the spell of pleasure or terrified by some fear. Yes, he said, everything that deceives appears to cast a spell upon the mind. Well then, as I was just saying, we must look for those who are the best guardians of the indwelling conviction that what they have to do is what they at any time believe to be best for the state. Then we must observe them from childhood up and propose them tasks in which one would be most likely to forget this principle or be deceived, and he whose memory is sure and who cannot be beguiled, we must accept, and the other kind we must cross off from our list. Is it not that so? Yes, and again we must subject them to toils and pains and competitions in which we have to watch for the same traits. Right, he said. Then, said I, must we not institute a third kind of competitive test with regard to sorcery and observe them in that? Just as men conduct cults to noises and uproar to see if they are liable to take fright, so we must bring these lads while young into fears, and again pass them into pleasures, testing them much more carefully than men do gold in the fire, to see if the man remains immune to such witchcraft and preserves his composure throughout, a good guardian of himself and the culture which he has received, maintaining the true rhythm and harmony of his being in all those conditions, and the character that would make him most useful to himself and to the state. And he who, as a boy, lad, and man endures the test and issues from it unspoiled, we must establish as ruler of over our city and its guardian, and bestow rewards upon him in life, and in death the allotment of the supreme honors of burial rites and other memorials. But a man of the other type we must reject. Such, said I, appears to me, Glaucon, the general notion of our selection and appointment of rulers and guardians as sketched in outline, but not drawn out in detail. I too, he said, think much the same. Then would it not truly be most proper to designate these as guardians in the full sense of the word, watchers against foemen without a friends within, so that the latter shall not wish and the former shall not be able to work harm, but to name those youths whom we were calling guardians just now, helpers and aids for the decrease of the rulers? I think so, he replied. How then, said I might we contrive one of those opportune falsehoods of which we were just now speaking? So as by one noble lie to persuade, if possible, the rulers themselves, but failing that the rest of the city.
Failing that, if we don't convince the rulers themselves, at least we want to convince the city using this noble lie, this opportune falsehood. Evo, to je ovaj centralan dio. Sad možeš tu nastaviti.
What kind of a fiction do you mean? Said he. Nothing unprecedented, said I, but a sort of Phoenician tale, something that has happened ere now in many parts of the world, as the poets aver and have induced men to believe, but that has not happened and perhaps would not be likely to happen in our day, and demanding no little persuasion to make it believable. You act like one who shrinks from telling his thought, he said. You will think that I have right good reason for shrinking when I have told, I said. Say on, said he, and don't be afraid. Very well, I will. and yet I hardly know how to find the audacity or the words to speak and undertake to persuade first the rulers themselves and the soldiers, and then the rest of the city, that in good sooth all our training and educating of them were things that they imagined, and that happened to them as it were in a dream, but that in reality at that time they were down within the earth, being molded and fostered themselves, while their weapons and the rest of their equipment were being fashioned. And when they were quite finished, the earth, as being their mother, delivered them. And now, as if their land were their mother and their nurse, they ought to take thought for her and defend her against any attack, and regard the other citizens as their brothers and children of the self-same earth. It is not for nothing, he said, that you were so bashful about coming out with your lie. It was quite natural that I should be. I said, but all the same hear the rest of the story. While all of you in the city are brothers, we will say in our tale, yet God in fashioning those of you who are fitted to hold rule mingled gold in their generation, for which reason they are the most precious, but in the helpers silver and iron and brass in the farmers and other craftsmen. And as you are all akin, though for the most part you will breed after your kinds, it may sometimes happen that a golden father would beget a silver son, and that a golden offspring would come from a silver sire, and that the rest would in like manner be born of one another. So that the first and chief injunction that a god lays upon the rulers is that of nothing else are they to be such careful guardians and so intently observant as of the intermixture of these metals in the souls of their offspring, and if sons are born to them with an infusion of brass or iron, they shall by no means give way to pity in their treatment of them, but shall assign to each the status due to his nature and thrust them out among the artisans of the farmers. And again, if from these there is born a son with unexpected gold or silver in his composition, they shall honor such and bid them go up higher, some to the office or of guardian, some to the assistantship, alleging that there is an oracle, that the state shall then be overthrown when the man of iron or brass is its guardian. Do you see any way of getting them to believe this tale? No, not these themselves, he said, but I do their sons and successors and the rest of mankind who come after. Well, said I, even that would have a good effect, making them more inclined to care for the state and one another. For I think I apprehend your meaning, and this shall fall out as a tradition guides. But let us arm these sons of earth and conduct them under the leadership of their rulers. And when they have arrived, they must look out for the fairest site in the city for their encampment, a position from which they could best hold down rebellion against the laws from within and repel aggression from without as of a wolf against the fold. And after they have encamped and sacrificed to the proper gods, they must make their lairs, must they not? Yes, he said, and this must be of a character keep out the cold in winter and be sufficient in summer? Of course, for I presume you are speaking of their houses. Yes, said I, the houses of soldiers, not of money-makers. What distinction do you intend by that? He said. I will try to tell you, I said. It is surely the most monstrous and shameful thing in the world for shepherds to breed the dogs who are to help them with their flocks in such wise and such a nature that from indiscipline or hunger or some other evil condition the dogs themselves shall attack the sheep and injure them and be likened to wolves instead of dogs. A terrible thing indeed, he said. Must we not then guard by every means in our power against our helpers treating the citizens in any such way, and because they are the stronger, converting themselves from benign assistants into savage masters? We must, he said, and would they not have been provided with the chief safeguard if their education has really been a good one? But it surely has, he said. That, said I, dear Glaucon, we may not properly affirm, but what we were just now saying we may, that they must have the right education, whatever it is, if they are to have what will do most to make them gentle to one another and to their charges. That is right, he said. In addition, moreover, to such an education, a thoughtful man would affirm that their houses and the possessions provided for them ought to be such as not to interfere with the best performance of their own work as guardians, and not to incite them to wrong the other citizens. He will rightly affirm that. Consider then, said I, whether if that is to be their character, their habitations and ways of life must not be something after this fashion. In the first place, none must possess any private property save the indispensable. Secondly, none must have any habitation or treasure house which is not open for all to enter at will. Their food, in such quantities as are needful for athletes of war, sober and brave, they must receive as an agreed stipend from the other citizens as the wages of their guardianship, so measured that there shall be neither superfluity at the end of the year nor any lack. And resorting to a common mess, like soldiers on campaign, they will live together. Gold and silver, we will tell them, they have of the divine quality from the gods always in their souls, and they have no need of metal of men, nor does holiness suffer them to mingle and contaminate that heavenly possession with the acquisition of mortal gold, since many impious deeds have been done about the coin of the multitude, while that which dwells within them is unsullied. But for these only of all the dwellers in the city it is not lawful to handle gold and silver, and to touch them, nor yet to come under the same roof with them, nor to hang them as ornaments on their limbs, nor to drink from silver and gold. So living they would save themselves and save their city. But whenever they shall acquire for themselves land or their own and houses and coin, they will be householders and farmers instead of guardians, and will be transformed from the helpers of their fellow citizens to their enemies and masters, and so in hating and being hated, plotting and being plotted against, they will pass their days fearing far more and rather the townsmen within than the foemen without, and then even then laying the course of near shipwreck for themselves and the state. For all these reasons, said I, let us declare that such must be the provision of our guardians in lodging and other respects, and so legislate. Shall we not? By all means, said Glaucon.
I think we could possibly read one more paragraph, maybe 2 pages. So if we're going into book 4 now, možemo još 2 stranice možda čitati. Znači jedna je vrlo kratka i druga je normalne dužine.
Okay. Samo mi recite ti da stanem jer meni je na ovim sectionima, ne znam zašto mi se
Section, so 419a will continue. Ja ću reći kad staneš.
Okay, so Socrates. And Adeimantus broke in and said, "What will be your defense, Socrates, if anyone objects that you are not making these men very happy, and that through their own fault? For the city really belongs to them, and yet they get no enjoyment out of it, as ordinary men do by owning lands and building fine big houses and providing them with suitable furniture and winning the favor of the gods by private sacrifices and entertaining guests and enjoying too those possessions which you just now spoke of, gold and silver, and all that is customary for those who are expecting to be happy. But they seem, one might say, to be established in idleness in the city, exactly like hired mercenaries, with nothing to do but keep guard." "Yes," said I, "and what is more, they serve for board wages, and do not even receive pay in addition to their food as others do, so that they will not even be able to take a journey on their own account, if they wish to, or make presents to their mistress, or spend money in other directions according to their desires, like the men who are thought to be happy. These and many similar counts of the indictment you are omitting." "Well," said he, "assume these counts too." "What then will be our apology, you ask? Yes, by following the same path, I think we shall find what to reply. For we shall say that while it would not surprise us if these men thus living prove to be the most happy, yet the object on which we fix our eyes in the establishment of our state was not the exceptional happiness of any one class, but the greatest possible happiness of the city as a whole. For we thought that in a state so constituted we should be most likely to discover justice, as we should injustice in the worst governed state, and that when we had made these out, we could pass judgment on the issue of our long inquiry. Our first task, then, we take it, is to mold the model of a happy state. We're not isolating a small class in it and postulating their happiness, but that of a city as a whole. But the opposite type of state we will consider presently. It is as if we were coloring a statue and someone approached and censored us, saying that we did not apply the most beautiful pigments to the most beautiful parts of the image, since the eyes, which are the most beautiful part, have not been painted with purple but with black. We should think it a reasonable justification to reply, "Don't expect us, quiet friend, to paint the eyes so fine that they will not be like eyes at all, nor the other parts, but observe whether by assigning what is proper to each we render the whole beautiful. And so in the present case you must not require us to attach to the guardians a happiness that will make them anything but guardians. For in like manner we could clothe the farmers in robes of state and deck them with gold and bid them cultivate the soil at their pleasure, and we could make the potters recline on couches from left to right before the fire, drinking toasts and feasting with their wheel alongside to potter with when they are so disposed, and we can make all the others happy in the same fashion, so that thus the entire city may be happy. But urge us not to this, since if we yield, the farmers will not be a farmer, nor the potter a potter, nor will any other of the types that constitute state keep its form. However, for the others it matters less, for cobblers who deteriorate and are spoiled and pretend to be the workmen that they are not, are no great danger to a state, but the guardians of laws and of the city, who are not what they pretend to be, but only seem, destroy utterly, I would have you note, the entire state. And on the other hand, they alone are decisive of its good government and happiness. If then we are forming true guardians and keepers of our liberties, men least likely to harm the commonwealth, but the proponent of the other ideal is thinking of farmers and happy feasters, as it were in a festival and not in a civic community, he would have something else in mind than a state. Consider then whether our aim in establishing the guardians is the greatest possible happiness among them, or whether that is something we must look to see develop in the city as a whole, but these helpers and guardians are to be constrained and persuaded to do what will make them the best craftsmen in their own work, and similarly all the rest. And so, as the entire city develops and is ordered well, each class is to be left to the share of happiness that its nature comports.
Ok, evo, tu ćemo stati. Evo, to je jedan komad sa dva glavna dijela. Ova prva je bio o biti, prvi dio je bio ovaj izbor vladara među čuvarima, i drugi je bio kako ćemo ih u biti njegovati. I onaj prvi dio je posvećen isto ono takozvano noble lie, ne znam kako biste vi to preveli kao aristokratska laž. Je li laž muški ili ženski rod? Ne znam, je li?
Laž?
Da.
Ženska.
Ženska je. Znači, kako bi prevela to noble lie? Ženka?
To ste zadnje put rekli, evo sad sam baš tu gledala svoje naše bilješke. Vi ste kao trebali smo neke i sami pročitati kraj 3. knjige i razmisliti o dobronamjernoj laži.
Dobronamjerno, ali
možda plemenita laž.
Plemenita, to je dobro. Genajon je kao plemenito. Znači, genajon je kao nekako sretno rođena vrsta. Ovako, idemo natrag, to je bilo 413, ja mislim, gdje smo počeli, je li tako Evo, ako idemo natrag do početka. I evo, ja bih htjela čuti vaše komentare. Znači, počinjemo sa tim pitanjem, znači, interes, samo interes. I čemu služi ova pseudos, genajon, plemenita laž? I što mislite o tome? Kako je vaš dojam o ovom dijelu, znači kako ćemo ih izabrati, po kojim kriterijama i čemu treba služiti u biti ta dobronamjerna, na što liči takva dobronamjerna ili plemenita laž i zbog čega? Znači je bila stranica, mislim 413, na drugi dio gdje smo počeli. Znači trebaju imati ono pravo uvjerenje i to pravo uvjerenje, kako smo rekli, u biti treba biti da vidi u državi svoj interes, u čuvanje države svoj interes, da to nekako shvaćaju da podudari sa njihov interes sugrađana i država. Znači, šta je ta prema vama ta plemenita laž? Zašto je to uopće potrebno? Kome je to potrebno? Zbog čega?
Pa sad, baš ne znam, sad nije mi bilo jasno, ali sad kad ste razjasnili, znači da znači njihovi interesi su ujedno i interesi države. Znači ono što oni rade kao u svojem interesu bi istovremeno trebalo bi ispasti i za interes države.
Da, bitno je da oni to tako sami doživljaju. Da, je to.
Da. Znači, ako sad neko hoće samo raditi za sebe, ali zapravo onda on ne vidi da samim time, znači on je uvjeren da radi za sebe, ali znači prevaren je u tome da ne vidi da je to ujedno i dobrobit države.
Da, to je pitanje. Znači, evo, ako ste primijetili, više puta je rekao u razgovoru sa Glaukonom u biti hoćemo li uspjeti uvjeriti vladara o tome. I šta je odgovor bio?
Pa opet ja sam isto tu zamijetila istinito mišljenje. Znači onda ne bude to istinito mišljenje za njih kao. To smo zadnji put isto neke razgovarali.
Genaion soidos u biti njemu nije potrebno. Ako gledate opet, znači kad to je u biti počeli smo 412, znači izbor najboljeg vladara je jedan proces. A ovo što treba biti vladar, treba imati prvo pred sobom interes države. A kako ćemo naći vladar koji će prvotno gledati na državu? Treba što raditi da bi...
Voljeti to.
Voljeti. To je tako interesantno ako razmišljate. Znači, prvo treba vladar voljeti svoju državu. Ako ćemo povezati sa današnjom situacijom, ko vam pada na pamet?
Da voli državu.
Da. Da voli svoju državu.
Da. Predsjednik Ukrajine.
Pa da, ja mislim da prvotno vam pada na pamet. Njemu su ponudili exit. A jeste čuli njegov odgovor? Amerikanci su ponudili da će ga transportirati iz Ukrajine negdje. And his answer was, I don't need a ride, I need ammunition. Mogao je pobjeći. Pa nije. Očito je njemu bitno, ne radi sebe, jer je on isto rekao, prvotno je on, he's the first target, according to the intelligence that he got from the US Secret Service and other secret services. Target number one. Ali, evo, pogledamo sad, opet Platonovo da je tu sad izražavanje, on kaže, taj će imati obzir na državu prvotno, koji najviše i voli državu i volit će kad, znači, to get the best guardian of the states. He would be the most likely to be careful of that which he loved. And he would be most likely to love that whose interests he supposed to coincide with his own, and thought that when it prospered, he too would prosper, and if not, the contrary. To je u biti to što kod Spinoza se opisuje kao veća ljubav, viša ljubav. Znači ne ta koji samo gleda ono što će zadovoljiti moje potrebe ili moje želje za užitkom ili za ugodom, nego u biti koji će zadovoljiti moju potrebu da ono dobro što ja prepoznam kao moje pravo dobro želim za druge kao i za sebe. Jer shvaćam da moj dobro ne može nikada biti potpuno bez da bude svima isto tako. To je malo utopičko za naš svijet, ali mislim da vidimo u heroičkom stavu jednog Zelinskog, da ipak pojedini ljudi utjeluju to i njih trebamo izabrati kao čuvare, kao vladare. Evo, tako, prema idealnom shvaćanju toga, naravno prepoznamo što se događa s ljudima i da ponekad nešto što u nekom početku izgleda idealno se pretvara sa vremenom u suprotnost. Ali idemo dalje još misleći na taj ideal. Znači, in this case, to get the best of the guardians, they must have the most regard of the state, and they must then be careful. They'll be the ones who will have the most regard of the state are the ones who will consider the state something that they love, and that the interests of the state are the same as my own interests. Evo, ta država, ne smijemo zaboraviti da je analogija isto čime? Analogija sa dušom. Znači, isto trebamo svaki put kad čitamo ove stvari sjetiti se, ali taj izbor najboljeg vladara isto se odnosi na dušu. I taj koji će voditi najbolje je taj koji će shvatiti da interese duše podudaraju se sa mojim općenito. Znači, nema dio mene koji mogu zanemariti ako će biti sjelo, mislim, država u sredina ili duša od sjeline, ako će biti duša u sjeline sretna, onda je potrebno da svak dio bude sretan. Ako se sjetite, ta slika se ponavlja na kraju, kad je kritika Sokratovog prijedloga kako treba nagraditi vladara. Onda je pitanje, nekog mu prigovara da ne stavi najljepšu boju gdje je oko. To je biti opet slika čovjeka u selini. Interesantno koliko su tu slojevi predstavljeni u svakom dijelu. Tako trebate čitati slojovito da osjetite kako se kreće u biti to razmišljanje. So everything is moving at different levels at the same time. Ok, znači sad onda ovo testiranje isto kao predhoda ovaj dio o toj plemenitoj laži. Znači, radi se o tome imati to pravo uvjerenje. A u biti očekuje se da taj koji ima to obrazovanje kako spada za čuvara, da njemu nije potrebno taj laž. Znači, zašto je uopće neugodno, šta mislite, zašto je uopće neugodno Sokrat pričati o ovoj priči koji će on pričati? Znači, o čemu se radi sa ovom genaion soidos, ovom plemenitom laž prema vama, šta mislite? Mislim, kome je takva plemenita laž potrebna, a kome nije?
Pa oni koji posjeduju istinu i znanje, ispravno vjerovanje, njima nije potrebno, ali onima koji nisu u takvom stanju, onda kako bi ih se dovelo do takvog stanja, onda se kao potrebno je koristiti se tim, ajmo reći, bijelim lažima, tim plemenitim lažima.
Da, a drugi što mislite, čime biste to usporedili onda?
Ne znam, meni baš tu sad to nekak ne leži, kak sad lažima doći do istine.
A zato se Sokrat i srami nekako zbog toga, jer propovijeda istinu cijelo vrijeme, a sad odjednom ali negdje je rekao kao da se samo kao lijek te laži koriste, a ne kao sredstvo. A opet onda ovdje ispada da kao cilj opravdava sredstvo, ne znam.
Aha. A čime bismo mogli to usporediti danas, recimo? Plemenita laž.
Pa da uvjerimo nekoga da radi nešto da je dobro za njega. Jer kad sad slušamo taj odgoj kako oni trebaju sa ovima, sa onima, pa ih uputiti u ovo, uputiti u ono, pa kak sad oni to sad sve znaju? Po čemu su oni bolji i imaju više znanja da znaju kak to treba?
Da.
To mi je malo bilo onak dobro. Otkud njima to znanje? Ne znam.
Da.
Mislim, razmišljam samo.
A gdje imamo takav doživljaj u svom odgoju?
Roditelja djece.
Znači prije je rečeno ko će biti zapravo bolji vladar. Jel se sjetite ko će biti bolji? Prvotno
Stariji, mislim da su rekli.
Stariji. Znači mislimo prvo na roditelji. Oni nam daju neko znanje bez obrazloženja na početku, osim kad pokušaju po svom znanju odgovoriti na teška pitanja koje djeca stavljaju. Djeca uvijek stavljaju teška pitanja i kad su mala, a mi odgovorimo kako možemo. A ko još to radi osim roditelji?
Učitelji i učenici, valjda.
Da, učitelji, učenici, ali samo do neke razine, ali ko u društvu koristi plemenite laž?
Pa to se isto i u politici koristi za upravljanje masama, jel? Kad hoćeš da narod postupa nekako kako...
Misliš li to da je to plemenita? To je ovaj dio koji...
Ne mislim, ali u idealnom smislu, ako je političar dobronamjeran i voli svoju državu, to bi radio, ali...
Da, ali mjesto gdje je plemenita laž, mislim da treba podsjetiti. Znači, Platon je pisao u vrijeme Euripida. To je vrijeme prosvjetiteljstvo. To je vrijeme kad se inače pretvara bi rekla autoritet u individualnom životu već racionalnim razmišljanjem. Znači, to je počelo već sa predsokratovcima koji su mjesto da se pozivaju na bogove, su počeli razmišljati pa otkud stvari, što je početak u smislu počelo, je li to voda, je li to zrak, je li to nus, je li to možda a sretan Sokrat mladi misli da je možda Anaksagora ima odgovor na pitanje zašto su stvari tako i zašto su tako najbolji. Znači, počeli su razmišljati vlastitim glavama. I onda je počeo se stvoriti jedan jaz između starog autoriteta i novog autoriteta. Znači, stari autoritet je bio koji u Grčkoj, u staroj Grčkoj?
Mitologija, valjda, mitovi. Ako je
da, sad mitologija je u biti riječ koju je stvorio Platon, mitologen.
Uh-huh.
A mitovi su bili priče o čemu?
O svijetu.
O bogovima, o njihovom utjecaju, pokušaj isto objašnjavati stvari, ali ne još na potpuno racionalan način, nego da uvjeravaš ljudi da se ponašaju tako ili onako. A Platon prvi, Sokrat, Heraklit, Xenofan su počeli stavljati to pitanje da li je moguće smatrati neku silu Bogom kad je konflikt s drugima, kad ne može biti u biti sudac o dobrom i zlu, kada sam oslikava svijet u kojem čovjek živi. Aha, a šta odgovara mitovima o staroj Grčkoj danas? Šta imamo, koji pojava u današnjem svijetu koji odgovara tom starom autoritetu u staroj Grčkoj?
A religije možda?
Religija.
Da.
O tome je stvar. A religija po sebi ne mora biti loša stvar. Ali može izazvati neugode kod čovjeka kada nije u skladu sa racionalnim mišljenjem. I tako ovdje se radi ne o nekim zlim namjerama, nego o nečemu drugome. Znači, kome je potrebna religija?
A ljudima koji nisu filozofični, koji ne misle.
Da.
Nego im trebaju gotovi predlošci ideja dobrog.
Tako, otprilike imamo situacije ovdje. Znači, može biti upitno kome treba religija. Znači, imamo isto kod Platona, recimo u dijalogu Eutifron, slučaj gdje razmišljamo o pobožnosti i ulozi molitve, recimo žrtvovanje u životu jednog čovjeka koji bi mogao biti filozof. To je dio pravednosti koji se odnosi na bogove, na našem odnosu sa bogovima prema Eutifronu. Znači, nije isključeno da religija ima neku ulogu još i u životu čovjeka koji je obrazovan i koji racionalno misli. Ali imamo taj jaz koji se pojavi između racionalnog mišljenja i uvjerenja koji su potrebna za zdravu državu, za zdravu dušu. Znači, ako gledamo analogiju koju je tu namjeravana, znači, trebamo ostvoriti harmoniju među ovim dijelovima duše i zdravlje i sreće i dobro za cijelu državu. A ako neki ljudi nisu sposobni ili nisu uživali u takvom obrazovanju, onda imamo situaciju gdje treba usaditi u ljudi uvjerenja koji odgovaraju tome što bi postigli sami da su dobili takvo obrazovanje. Sad pitanje da li su svi sposobni ili nisu, to ćemo staviti na stranu trenutno. Mislim da je to još jedno pitanje o kojem treba razmišljati. Bitno je ovdje ne zaboraviti na pozadinu. Znači, neka vrsta prosvjetiteljstva se pojavi u klasičnoj Grčkoj u ovoj dobi i više nije posebno razumljivo prihvatiti sve te priče o bogovima. Svakako ne za Sokrata, svakako ne za Platona, nego se postavlja kao ideal nešto što se može racionalno braniti. Evo, sad ćete vi malo pričati jer sad imam malo problem sa disanjem, pa evo, recite što vi mislite. Koje uloga biste vi ostavili za religiju?
Treba malo razmisliti.
Da.
Ne znam, mene zanima da li se to može povezati sa nekim a ne znam kako bi sad to, znači na primjer iz usporedbe sa crtom. I onda ako uzmemo da racionalno matematičko mišljenje ide sve skupa do jedne točke, ali onda ta neka ideja dobra ili kao da racionalno mišljenje i govor čak do nekud idu i ne mogu preći da bi objasnili ono nadrealno, nadnaravno, ovo zemaljsko, jer mi jesmo dio tog tjelesnog i ovoga i zemaljskoga, ali po Platonu se čini da postoji i ono nadtjelesno ili ovoga, koje onda teško je objasniti tim nekim čak i racionalnim mišljenjem. Znači možemo doći do jedne točke, ali onda onda prestaju vrijediti ti zakoni, te tjelesnosti i teško je onda to objasniti unutar tih zakonitosti. I onda religija mi se čini skupa sa možda i umjetnošću kao nekakav drugčiji način izražavanja ili drugčiji aspekt čovjekovog bivanja koji nam pomaže dosegnuti taj iza te točke na neki način. Ne znam, tako šta ja znam, dobivam dojam ili barem ja tako nekako to interpretiram sve skupa, pa ne znam da li se onda to...
Mislim da je to izvrstan završetak našeg današnjeg razgovora. Super je to povezati tako, ja mislim. Upravo mislim da si pogodilo u srž problematike, znači i jedna i druga, mislim, znači kao što si sama vidjela, u biti filozof isto rezervira za sebe pravo da voli umjetnost. I Sokrat kaže, mi ćemo morati cenzurirati ova djela, ali ipak bi htio ih vratiti nekako u državu na kraj. Znači, da, upravo ono pitanje koje nadilazi naše racionalne sposobnosti i mogućnosti rješavanje kao kalkulacije o ograničenim stvarima. Neke stvari spadaju u to područje gdje možemo riješiti probleme sa ovim plus minus i zakonima prirode i zakonima razmišljanje, ali onda dođemo do trenutka kad nam je potreban ipak potrebno ono što nadilazi. I u biti je to stalno prisutno u našem razmišljanju. Povezivanje sa usporedbom od crti je baš nešto što bi ja radila na ovom mjestu, da bez onog idejnog, bez sadržaja ideja nema ni promišljanje problematika bilo kakvi. Ne možemo ići od A do B bez nekako imaginarno shvaćanje tog koraka unaprijed. Stalno smo u tom pisanje između ograničenog i neograničenog, onog uvjetnog i bezuvjetnog. Evo, ja ću morati završiti ubrzo, ja ću sad doći natrag, možete doći natrag ako želite, isključim sad snimanje. Evo, stop record.